Hotep family, you're tuning in to the pro-black perspective on KWAZ radio. Be sure to check out the other programs on the KWAZ radio network, including the Harsh Reality podcast, the Bitter Medicine podcast, and of course the Learning Curve with the Revolutionary Matron. Today we're going to finish The Wretched of the Earth. It's been a long journey. We did 20 episodes. Each of them around 12 pages, and 20 times 12 is 240. 240 is the number of pages in The Wretched of the Earth, so we should be finished today. Okay. And I mean, if there's more pages, there's less pages, we'll just finish it like normal people. But other than that, let's just get started. Before we go, however, I want you guys to listen to this. All right.
This is D Webb with the Harsh Reality Podcast, asking you to tune in where we tackle the news of the day that affects our community, only on KWAZ Radio.
Greetings, fam. Tune in to The Learning Curve with me, the Revolutionary Matron on KWAZ Radio.
Greetings, everyone. This is Koku from the Bitter Medicine Podcast, inviting you to tune in to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio.
All right, so that's nice. All right, so Kofi says greetings. Greetings, Kofi. Thanks for being here today. Thank you for joining me. We're going to finish off this book, and I appreciate your presence here. All right. So the reason why we have dealt at length with the theories by the colonial scholars, it's not so much to demonstrate their paucity and absurdity as to address an extremely important theoretical and practical question. Algerian criminality, in fact, was given relatively little attention among the questions which the revolution was confronted with and the issues which were raised during discussions on political enlightenment and demystification. But the few debates on the subject were so constructive that they enabled us to examine further and better identify the notion of individual and social freedom. When the question of Algerian criminality is broached with leaders and militants in the heat of revolution, when the average number of crimes, misdemeanors, and thefts in the period prior to the revolution are brought to light, when it is explained that the physiognomy of a crime and the occurrence of misdemeanors are based on the relationships between men and women, between man and state, and everyone gets the message, when we see the notion of the Algerian or North African as born criminal dislodged before our very eyes, a notion which was also planted in the Algerians' consciousness because, after all, we are bad, quick-tempered, aggressive people, and that's the way we are, then yes, we can say the revolution is making progress. So, just to clarify, and I mean, look, I'm thinking about it, next Saturday to give you guys a summary of, not this Saturday, but next Saturday, give you guys a summary of this book, maybe the top 10 quotes or something, top 10, whatever. Either way, what he's saying right here is that, you have all this criminality, this, the North African is criminal and yada, yada. And then the question becomes, well, we're doing this revolution. How do we encounter this, right? And the Algerians did broach this concept, right? But what you see quickly is that it's dislodged, right? The question of the criminality of an African, or not an African, but the question of the criminality of a people, or the inherent criminality of the people, really relates to their position in the world. What their relationships are between the men and the women, between the man and the state, and so on and so forth. We see this in the African diaspora where the man and woman are at odds. I just think that's a pretty interesting point. Hopefully he explores it a little deeper, but if not, still, it's just an interesting thing to think about. The Learning Curve with the Revolutionary Matron is in the chat, so peace to you, sister. Machiavelli is also here, but he can't hear us, so it's all good. All right, page 229. So the major theoretical problem is that the insult to man, which is in ourselves, must be identified, demystified, and hunted down at all times and in all places. We must not expect a nation to produce new men. We must not expect men to change imperceptibly as the revolution constantly innovates. It is true both processes are important, but it is the consciousness that needs help. If the revolution in practice is meant to be totally liberating and exceptionally productive, Everything must be accounted for. The revolutionary feels a particularly strong need to totalize events, to handle everything, to settle everything, to assume responsibility for everything. The consciousness then does not balk at thinking back or marking time if need be. This is the reason why, as a combat unit progresses in the field, the end of an ambush does not mean cause for respite, but the very moment for the consciousness to go one step further, since everything must work in unison. Yes, the Algerians spontaneously acknowledged the magistrates and police officers were right. 44. It was evident, moreover, that this identification with the image invented by the European was highly ambivalent. The European, in fact, seemed to be paying an equally ambivalent tribute to the violent, excitable, brutal, jealous, proud, and arrogant Algerian who stakes his life on a detail or a word, etc. Let us mention in passing that in their confrontation with the French from metropolitan France, the Europeans in Algeria increasingly tend to identify with the image of the Algerian in their opposition to the French. The Europeans in Algeria increasingly tend to identify with the image of the Algerian, or this image of the Algerian in their opposition to the French. So he's saying that the Europeans in Algeria would more and more identify the Algerian as an inherent criminal, the more the French would come from France. You know, it's basically, I mean, that's what you'd expect. In a war setting, that's what you'd expect. In the sense of, let's say, let's come back to America, right? Black Americans are whooping ass in America, right? To the point where the United States now has to call on allies, okay? When the United States calls on allies like England and France to help them deal with their African American problem, like, it hasn't even got that far, right? If they were to do that, then the Europeans here, the white Americans, would identify that there's something wrong with African Americans, that they're no longer part of our nation, more so because now they have allies and they're identifying more with their allies. They're not going to be like, well, look, those Europeans are foreigners and these African Americans are Americans, right? Or are native here or whatever. They're going to identify more and more with the whites, and that should be expected, right? So yes, the Algerians spontaneously acknowledged the magistrates and police officers were right. So the Algerians acknowledged that they were in fact more criminal, right? This narcissistic aspect of Algerian criminality as a manifestation of genuine virility had to be tackled again and reconsidered in light of colonial history, by showing, for example, how the criminality of the Algerians in France fundamentally differed from the criminality of the Algerians directly subjected to colonial exploitation. So again, this is like the typical confusion, of society. So what society does, what happens if you don't have that international thinking process, is that you look at things very locally, So for instance, people say, let's say, oh, blacks have this high criminality. And then you look at Africa and you say, I mean, that's the ultimate, disputation, which is that, no, actually in Africa, they do not have high prison rates, or they don't have high imprisonment rates, or they don't have high criminality, right? And so in this example, you see that the Algerians in France didn't really have high criminality, but the Algerians in Algeria did, because they were under colonial exploitation. And it kind of tells you how much political economics is very, very important. It's right now, but like before going to Africa, I'm thinking to myself, I should write something on that subject. But if I don't, it's just probably because I found something better to write about. But notwithstanding, I think it's a really important subject. So a second aspect caught our attention. In Algeria, criminality among Algerians occurred practically in a closed circle. The Algerians robbed each other, tore each other to pieces, and killed each other. In Algeria, the Algerians seldom attacked the French and avoided quarreling with them. In France, however, the immigrants' criminality crossed boundaries between communities and social categories. In France, Algerian criminality is diminishing. It is mainly directed at the French, and the motives are entirely new. One paradox, however, helped us considerably to get the militants to understand that since 1954, common law crimes have virtually disappeared. Gone are the quarrels, the disputes over minor details ending in homicide. Gone the explosive fits of rage because the neighbor caught sight of my wife's forehead or left shoulder. The national struggle appears to have channeled all this anger and nationalized every effective and emotional reaction. The French magistrates and lawyers have already noticed this, but the militant had to be made aware of it and understand the reason. We can now have to find an explanation. Could it be said that the war, the privileged terrain for expressing finally a collective aggressiveness, directs congenitally murderous acts at the occupier? It is common knowledge that significant social upheavals. Just to clarify, there, he's saying that in war. So, that, like, look at this right here. Look at this right here. So, a lot of you say, "Hey, man, why are black people fighting each other? You should fight other people. Why are black people fighting each other?" Yeah, you say that, but what Fanon is pointing out is that in war, that's when it happens. The fact that you're not at war is the reason why you're fighting yourselves, because you are not at war. That aggression is not going to be pointed at the occupier until that collective aggression is pointed at that occupier. And if we're being honest, a lot of African people are not in that collective aggressiveness. We do not have that collective aggressiveness against Wazungu. You know, we're very collectively passive to Wazungu, and we have to confess that. So, directs congenitally murderous acts at the occupier. It is common knowledge that significant social upheavals lessen the occurrence of misdemeanors and mental disorders. The existence of war, which was breaking Algeria in two and rejecting the judicial and administrative machine onto the side of the enemy, was therefore a perfectly good explanation for the decline in Algerian criminality. You know, I really wish, like, I gotta admit, I'm very mad that I can't footnote this, because I'm thinking about, like, it just dawned on me because this book is ending that, no, actually I can't even. All right, it just dawned on me because this book is ending that, you know, I could, you know, further exploit it by doing like something, but I guess not. You guys who heard it here, you know, you heard it here. But this is this is actually pretty important, you know. What can I do? Let me just take a screenshot. I'll just take a screenshot and save it, probably on the Discord, right? Just bear with me for 2 seconds. What's interesting is that you could just do this. It copies, and then you go to the Discord, and you just hit Control V, and then you paste the image right away. So for those of you who don't know, you could just, well, if you're on computer, you can just copy and paste just like that. All right. Like you could copy and paste pictures and images. It's pretty cool. Technology is advancing, huh? All right, Wazungu's technology is advancing. In the countries of the Maghreb, already liberated, however, this was true during the liberation struggle and remains so to an even greater degree during independence. It is therefore apparent that the colonial context is sufficiently original to afford a reinterpretation of criminality. This is what we have done for the militants. Today, everyone on our side knows that criminality is not the result of the Algerian's continental nature, nor the configuration of his nervous system. The war in Algeria and wars of national liberation bring out the true protagonists. We have demonstrated that in the colonial situation, the colonizer confronted with themselves. They tend to use each other as a screen. Each prevents his neighbor from seeing the national enemy. And when exhausted after a 16-hour day of hard work, the colonized subject collapses on his mat, and a child on the other side of the canvas partition cries and prevents him from sleeping. It just so happens it's a little Algerian. When he goes to beg for a little semolina or a little oil from the shopkeeper to whom he already owes several hundred francs, and his request is turned down, he is overwhelmed by an immense hatred and desire to kill. And the shopkeeper happens to be an Algerian. When after weeks of keeping a low profile, he finds himself cornered one day by a Qaid demanding his taxes, he is not even allowed the opportunity to direct his hatred against the European administrator. Before him stands the Qaid, who excites his hatred, and he happens to be an Algerian. So, you know, I do remember a bit of medicine pointing this out, and I think it's worth repeating here. But, you know, this idea that, you know, in our daily lives, in our isolated lives, the problem we face, the people who deliver the problems to us are usually, well, it depends on where you are, usually the African people. You know, like if you're in a desperate situation, you're also surrounded by African people who are doing you dirty. You know, melanin 100%. I surprisingly, she didn't say shalom, but she said greetings, B1. You know, black first. You know, so yeah, black first. But yeah, you know, what's interesting is that, you know, you don't, like, you're not confronted with like a white antagonist. You know, I could say, for instance, like if like let's say you're in a black neighborhood, right? Your woman is black. Mshaka says I ain't good on my PC. All right, your woman is black. You're black, obviously, right? Your woman is black. Your man is black. Whatever, you know. Your children are black. Your neighbors are black, right? Your maybe not your grocery store is black, but you know, it's whatever, right? Now, check this out. You come home, you're tired. You work 16 hours, okay? You have 2 jobs, you work 16 hours, and okay, let's say you're a man, right? Your woman, actually there's 2 sisters in the chat, and it looks like 2 brothers, so we'll say, let's say you're a woman. Oh man, imagine this. Okay, so you're a woman, right? You're a woman and you come home after 2 work shifts, right? And you see that your man is playing video games. Now, he's playing Call of Duty, and let's say he usually works 1 job, okay? He's playing Call of Duty, and the house, and he has like dirty dishes in the sink, right? And you come home and you say, oh man, dishes again, right? Now you just work 2 hours, you know, you work 16 hours, you also are tired, right? You're not interested in washing somebody's dishes when they were there playing video games. You don't even have time to relax, and you say, babe, you got some dishes in the sink. He's like, and you know, reasonably, he's like, yeah, okay, I'll get it soon. I just put them there, you know, and I'm gonna get them after this game, right? So you're like, fine, you know, whatever, right? And then you hear that he's queuing up for another game, you know, like he's on the voice mic, and he's like, yeah, I gotta go, blah blah blah, and then you know, he's like, nah, I just gotta go wash these dishes. Oh, nah, I ain't no, nah. I mean, look, I can play another game. I mean, real talk, the dishes ain't going nowhere, right? That's what he says, right? Suddenly you're pissed. You know, you're pissed, and you're pissed at a black person. You know, now if you go on the computer, you know, you're gonna say there's, you know, these black men, you know, or if you not on the computer and you just or you talking to your friends, you like, yeah, you know, Daryl is at it again, you know, if the kids are hungry and you gotta, you know, cook up something and feed them, and homie's still playing the video game, right? You just like, look, this can't work between us, you know. At no point in this relationship, however, do you turn your attention to Wazungu. You know, I mean, you're not gonna be like, well, Wazungu made the video game, because that's dumb. You know, that's dumb. Sure, Wazungu made the video game, but you know, he just made a product. You know, homie could also be watching movies. Homie could be, you know, shit, he could be doing a podcast. You know what I'm saying? Like, he could be doing anything. The point is that if the house, and see, the thing is this too, that in those sort of situations, right, it don't even have to be that bad. It could be like 1 cup in the sink, you know, it could be like 1 cup in the sink. And when you have tension and when you have stress, that 1 cup looks like a pile. Okay, it don't even gotta be that. It could be just be that he's playing video games, you know, like Mchaka saying, he's a Twitch streamer, right? He's sitting down at his desk, he playing video games, he making bank, maybe, possibly, right? But the bed isn't fixed. Or even the bed is fixed, but the pillows are not lined up. Somehow he moved the pillow, he's like, oh yeah, I was looking for my phone earlier, and it's all good. And she's like, look, I want my bed. I take telling you to fix your bed. Now hear this right here. Now, a guy, he playing his video games, he minded his business. He like, look, that pillow thing is not that serious, right? But she's like, look, I'm just tired of you always doing this. Every time I tell you to fix the bed, and you just don't do it. You just leave that for me to fix. And he's like, look, babe, it's not that serious. And then all of a sudden he's irritated. and he gets agitated. And what is he saying about the black woman? Again, there's no white man here. So what is he saying about black? He's like, oh man, they just can't relax. They blah blah blah. Now she's reasonable, he's reasonable, right? See what I'm saying? Mshaka just said she sounded OCD. You see what I'm saying? But see, you also have to realize that when people are under stress, exactly, Revolutionary Matron says, in a clothing situation, everything is stressful. When people are under stress, when people just work 16 hours, when people come back and they see something wrong, and they've said it before, and they've told you before, or they told you numerous times, right? One of the things that's going to happen too is that this person is going to feel like, oh, you don't respect me. Oh, you don't, so on and so forth. And then imagine if money's tight. Dude's a Twitch streamer. It was good for a minute. Then it kind of just fell off a little, right? Or it just whatever, just fell off, right? Or he just spent a lot of money on he's saving up money for some sort of new headset or something, or some new chair or something, right? And the kids want food. It's just real life, and it's real life if you have that sort of stress, if you have that sort of if you're pushing poverty, or if you are poverty, or if you are impoverished, when you're pushing poverty, because one of the things we have to realize about money, right, is that money is a stressor. Money gives you stress. That's what it's for. When you don't have enough money, right, you are suddenly emotionally unstable. Not just that, if you even have like if you're even overweight, you could be emotionally unstable. Somebody made a reference that if you ever see a woman who's loud and complaining a lot, you could tell she's overweight, right? And it could be the same for guys, but notwithstanding that, the money, the weight, the whatever, and then of course she spent 16 hours working, and the thing is that sometimes if you're doing two jobs, right, chances are your jobs aren't that great, Like I knew this, like I told y'all about the sister that was that eventually ended up homeless or whatever, right? I think she was working at like one of those retail stores, right? And when you work at those retail stores, you're standing up and you're folding clothes or something like that. Like she was like one of them fashion places, right? And she had, like, there was some exciting part to her job, right? For her, like if she were to channel her entrepreneurial energy into something, she could have done something great. But, in that retail situation, you're folding clothes, you're breaking down boxes, you're dealing with the drama of the other workers, the workers who are maybe half your age but disrespectful, the manager who's giving you odd hours, being insensitive to your own personal demands. You're dealing with having to travel by bus every day for hours, or you're dealing with the need to purchase a vehicle, but you're also behind on rent. And in this woman's circumstance, which I thought was dumb, to be honest, but you were also like, I think it's called like you're doing like payments, you're on a payment plan for your furniture, which I thought was dumb. I thought that was what really did her in. But you have this sort of life where you don't make enough money for the furniture, to get a car, for the rent, for the food, you're not necessarily eating as well as you want. This lady was actually a vegan, so it was pretty unaffordable to be a vegan. She was definitely not 21, my guy. But yeah, like something like that, right? But the point is that, like that, then you come home and, your kid is not doing well in school, or your kid or you can't, it's hard for you to make it to your kid's graduation, or something happens, like there's a lot going on, even you might have a man who's like, yeah, I'm not coming over tonight, blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean? Or like, he's like, hey, do I got to leave in the morning? You know what I'm saying? Like something like that, you know what I'm saying? But the point is that, like, life is not, when you have money, when you're well-to-do, when you have a nice, respectable job, I mean, Chaka's so far a student for a minute, right? So, he's not gonna really know about that per se. But when you get into that real world and you get that stress and you get that, it hits different. Now, obviously, if you get into the real world and you're doing real good, then you probably won't really feel it. But if you're surrounded in a situation, and this woman was actually better off than a lot of people, but she wasn't well off, right? You're dealing with like Fanon says, a neighbor who's loud or a dog who's loud. You're dealing with arguments across the street or across the way. Arguments outside of your window. And you look and it's black people. You listen and it's black people. That's going to cause that's going to trigger that sort of criminality, that sort of revenge, that sort of activity, that sort of action. And you're not going to get this sense of, well, let's blame the white man, because it's so far fetched. If the man doesn't, wash his plate or whatever, right? It's not the white man, And I mean, I did make it seem like she was OCD because I said it was like one plate, but like usually you'll find a circumstance where it's a ton of plates, and the guy might say, well, women should wash dishes and I shouldn't be washing dishes. I shouldn't be cooking. Well, or he might call and be like, hey, your kids are hungry. It's like, could you feed them? Could you do this? No, I ain't feeding them. Oh yeah, I'll feed them. And then he forgets, and like I said, if you binge in a video game, it's really hard to gauge time. People don't realize, but like video games be like I don't play Warzone or Call of Duty, but it's the ratchet of the earth. But yeah, I don't really play Call of Duty, but you could imagine that each of these matches might be 10 minutes when they're very, very addicting, right? Maybe 10 to 30 minutes. I don't know. Could be an hour if you just in something, like a good, like for people who don't play video games to understand, it's like good movie, where you sit down the movie and you don't even know it ended, or it's like just gripping you the entire time. It's very addicting. Jaka says pizza boxes under the couch, soda cans in the corner. Yeah, I mean, like, you gotta eat, but are you gonna wash dishes right away? Probably not. Not if you're not organized, not if it's, and like, here's the thing, if you're a guy and let's say you work 2 jobs and then you finally this is your way of relaxing, of decompressing, so, some people have, like a lot of people have those lazy days where they say, yeah, I'm not going to be hardworking today. I'm not going to engage in difficult subjects today. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take it easy. I'm going to take it very easy and move at my own pace, right? All right, so because I did skip a few, so I'm going to go back and, because homie's really engaged in the video game part, right? I really thought he couldn't hear me. I thought we were going to have I'm joking. All right. So low-key, we expect to be psychic about each other's needs. Yeah. So Revolution Major says we low-key we can be psychic about each other's needs. And not just that, but like realistically speaking, you have to decompress for yourself. The guy who is like the guy who is playing the video game is just finding a way to just finding an outlet for his emotional needs, right? The woman might come home, like they'll just use this example. I'm just saying because the sister's in here. The woman might come home and be like, why don't you do XYZ? Why don't you do this, that, so forth, blah, blah, blah. And the guy is trying to decompress from his own, why don't you do XYZ? Why don't you do XYZ? Whatever, right? And you get into this trouble because when she comes home and sees him not doing much, right? She develops this sort of anger towards him, right? And she also remembers the anger he had on her when he came home and she was drinking a box of wine. She was drinking wine and watching a movie, and he's like, why are you drinking wine and watching a movie? You don't hear the kids hungry? She's like, yeah, I just want to decompress. The thing is that you're in this situation of intense stress, of intense emotional withdrawal in a sense, right? And now he coming back and he's angry and she's decompressing and he's gonna have her on his ass. He's gonna be on her ass. And the thing is that people are going to remember this stuff. They're going to be like, oh, well, you didn't want me to drink my box of wine, my wine and blah, blah, blah. So why are you at blah, blah, blah? You're playing this video game. You're this chicken, blah, blah, blah. And then they get into this argument. They get into this fight. And then they might even get violent. One thing I can tell you about this sister, the Wretched of the Earth, was that she was remarkably violent. Like not like hurting me or anything, but like, unfortunately, and I mean, this is something M'Chaka would probably say, but I wouldn't say it. But unfortunately, a lot of times, like women who tell you that they were in like domestic abuse situations. I'm not saying all of them, but some of them really instigate, or not instigate, but they're really like, what are you gonna do? Like come hit me or something, or like fight me, or like they would hit you. And you'd be like, what? Like, what's going on? Like, there are women who will not lay a finger on you. Then there are women who will, like, legit slap you. Or, like, hit you with the back of their hand if you say something silly or funny. And it's like, yeah, what are you doing that for? And I could imagine that there are guys who do not take that so lightly as I did. I'm Chaka. Like, come on, bruh. You were born in 97. I know, like, come on. We know you. All right. Anyway, so low-key, we expect to be psychic about each other's needs. The feeling is that everything else is wrong and you need to be all right. Feeling is that everything else is wrong and you need to be all right. Yeah. He ain't that good of a streamer if he's saving up for a headset. No, I mean, sometimes he's starting off. Or you feel optimistic. When you feel powerless to determine your life, even making millions a year, you are still stressed. Yeah, when you feel powerless, yeah. So, I mean, I just want to clarify with that because Chaka seems to say he's not agreeing with that. I'm saying that, like, in my experience, I've heard from women who, like, I can't tell you, but I could vaguely remember this woman, like, just standing up to me, Or even I could say this, like, unfortunately, I go by this idea that humans are animals, okay? I know people don't like hearing that, and I think it was a bit of medicine yesterday who was saying that, we're more than animals, obviously. But, like, humans are animals, and unfortunately, like I've noticed, even in myself, right, how you can be pushed. Like what happens is this, and I put it inside of Zubiri, so you guys, make sure you guys read it, Zubiri, but I think a toxic woman can infect a man. And vice versa, right? To the point where people would do things that they otherwise wouldn't do. Now, I think there are some men who are, just violent and general. And so I really think some women should just distance themselves from those guys. But notwithstanding that, it could be that, like there are certain personalities that will bring out the worst in you. And you have to, for yourself, see if you're dealing with those sort of personalities, right? There will be people who will just talk down to you. Like if you're a guy, they will talk down to you, talk crap about you, try to, try to instigate. Like I can't even remember because I just I kind of blocked it out. But, I vaguely remember a few occasions where it was like, what in the world is going on? Like I could just imagine that other guys wouldn't be as chill, and it's not condoning these other guys. I think that's horrible to, one of the books that I have is it's called the African Warriors Bible, I think, but it's like one of the rules is that you do, like while you're studying martial arts, you do not use it against women, right? And I mean, obviously within reason, but yeah, I mean, like, yeah, but I don't think that human beings are innately so opposed to, or so, like, if you're abusing another person, they probably might lash out. And that's really like all we're saying here is that, the abuse that people experience is, like, for instance, for this, we go back to the Algerian paper, the abuse that this person experiences is from the Qaid, the tax collector, from the children crying, from the shopkeeper, the shopkeeper, and they're all of your ethnicity. They're not, French. They're not white Americans. They are all black. Now, obviously, the shopkeepers are not black here, or the tax collector is not really black here, but the tax collector is pretty automatic, and the shop is like, well, now it's like online, Anyhow, that was it. Hold on a second. There was a footnote here somewhere. I don't see it. So if you guys see the footnote, let me know. Oh, here, asterisk. Translator's note, Fanon uses the phrase peck order in English in the original text. Interesting. All right. So exposed to daily incitement to murder resulting from famine, eviction from his room for unpaid rent, a mother's withered breasts, children who are nothing but skin and bone, and the closure of a work site, and the jobless who hang around the foreman like crows. The colonized subject comes to see his fellow man as a relentless enemy. You see, again, he's dealing with famine, eviction. His wife is underfed. His children are underfed. He's now unemployed, and around him are only black people. He does not develop, and this is why political consciousness is so important. Political consciousness will say, no, the reason why this is happening to you is because of Wazungu, right? That's what political consciousness is for. But without political consciousness, you have to use your own faculties. And your own faculties are such that you only see what's in front of you. Like I said, those of you who are not parents, I can explain this to you, but you observe a child does not come onto this planet knowing that, oh yes, the seat of power is in Washington, D.C., the Vatican, and whatever the Queen of England had, wherever she lives, right? Windsor Palace or something, right? They do not come onto this planet thinking, let's direct our energy at, Windsor Palace, so on and so forth. If I discipline my kid or something, right, he's looking at me as the antagonist there. Now, he does not, for what it's worth, my kid does not really seem to develop any sort of long-standing dislike of me, or any sort of long-standing distrust of me or hatred of me. He seems to be very trusting and very loving of me, notwithstanding, the present circumstances. Like you could literally, if you wanted to, right, you could literally slap a kid on his hand or whatever, right? That's not too softly, but not too hard, right? You could slap him and then he would cry. And actually, if you slap him softly, he would cry, or if you even just raise your voice sternly, be like, hey, you did so on and so forth, he might potentially cry. He started doing that recently, though. He didn't do that when he was younger. But notwithstanding, if you then say, all right, give me a hug, he would just give you a hug, and then say he loves you, right? So as to say that, what I'm saying psychologically speaking is that actually adds to the psychology too, in the sense that, people do not, they're in the present moment, they're in the present moment, and the present moment is their poverty, their kaid, their shopkeeper. That's the present moment. And because that's the present moment, it behooves us to, think that they will direct it towards something that's not really present. You have to inform people and teach people the relevance of Windsor Palace, the relevance of Lisbon, the relevance of DC. And then that will make it so that they can actually navigate against those places, right? What was the learning curve says, people that look like you are competition. Wazungu is trying to recreate the cave. People that look like you are competition. Wazungu is trying to recreate the cave. The scarcity of the cave is being projected onto the whole world using violence. Okay, so I'm not sure about what the cave is, but our competition, Wazungu is trying to recreate the cave. If you mean the caveman life, the scarcity of the cave is being projected. Yeah, I mean, Wazungu, because that's what I'm saying. Wazungu doesn't, you don't have to show your face. If you like for instance, if you steal from somebody and you show your face, then I mean, like it's an old trick. It's an old trick. You know, if I want to steal from you, right? Then, like my most successful theft would be if you did not know I stole from you, and no, actually more successful would be if you blamed your neighbor for the theft. You know, it's like when somebody like pokes, touches you on one shoulder, on your left shoulder, and then they're on your right, and then you look on your left. You know. In fact, I think there was a video. I didn't get to see the whole video. I kind of skipped over it. Didn't really pay attention to it. There's like this, I think it's a black guy at a sports game, right? And eventually he's arguing with a bunch of dudes, right? And eventually something happens and he's fighting them. Now, I just skipped over because they were like, why is he even standing up for, like, I didn't really follow the context. But then they showed another video of the same event, and I kind of wish I found the original video. But what happens in the other video is this woman, right, who, like, the guy is arguing with a bunch of other guys, right? He turns his back and he's, arguing with people behind him. Like, he's encircled, right? Like a black guy, maybe a Latino guy, I don't know, right? But this Latino lady then grabs a cup of juice or something and just throws it at him when he turns his back. So he turns around and sees a bunch of dudes who are arguing with him, and he swings at all of them. And then, as far as I can tell, they all beat him up. But throughout the whole thing, this woman who was the instigator, right, wasn't even attacked. You know? And that's what so this person exerts his aggression to the guys he thinks had attacked him. You know? And the guys exert their aggression against the guy who does attack them. Right? But realistically speaking, the woman who instigated the fight by throwing the bottle, the cup at him, right? She's unscathed. So everybody else gets attacked except for her. And that's really how it's supposed to be. Like, I mean, not how it's supposed to be, but that's how, like, that's the smartest way for this woman to get an attack, right? Now with Wazungu, it's more so to deal with stealing or theft, but you would steal and then you would make it seem like somebody else stole from you, you know? Like, it's the Kaid who stole from you, or it's the shopkeeper who stole from you, or it's the kid who stole from you. But who worked you for 16 hours? You know? And that was actually a pretty good example. All right. I guess not. All right. So, exposed to daily incitement to murder resulting from blah, 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 blah. All right. Children who the crow crows. All right. The colonized subject comes to see his fellow man as a relentless enemy. If he stubs his bare feet on a large stone in his path, it is a fellow countryman who has put it there. And the meager olives he was about to pick, here are X's children who have eaten them during the night. So, like, you go to pick your olives and then, there are only so many that you could sell because somebody else's children ate some of your olives, So now you can only make so many bundles. And because you can only make so many bundles, you can only gain so much income. And because you could gain so much income, your children now have to suffer because this other person couldn't control their kids. So who are you angry with? You know what I mean? Now, of course, political consciousness has this difficulty because you're going to come to this guy and be like, no. The problem is the global international market that set the price for your olives to be so low, blah, 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 right? And it's like, shut the fuck up. This kid clearly ate my olives during the night. They knew it was wrong and they did it. There's a way, like, political education is a very difficult job, but, you have to go about and try it, right? So, yes, during the colonial period in Algeria and elsewhere, a lot of things could be committed for a few pounds of semolina. So I'm guessing that's the money. One can kill. You need to use your imagination to understand these things, or your memory. In the concentration camps, men killed each other for a morsel of bread. I can recall one horrible scene. It was in Oran in 1944. From the military camp where we were waiting to embark, the soldiers threw bits of bread to some Algerian children who fought for them in a frenzy of rage and hatred. A veterinarian could no doubt explain these events in terms of the famous pecking order noted in farmyards where the corn is bitterly fought over. The strongest bird gobbles up all the grain while the less aggressive grow visibly thinner. Any colony tends to become one vast farmyard, one vast concentration camp where the only law is that of the knife. So there are these stories coming out of Afghanistan, right? And in those stories, apparently American soldiers would throw candy out of their vehicles, right? And the kids would run to grab the candy. Now, here's what's interesting. The American soldiers would then try to purposely run over these kids and be successful sometimes. Or they would purposely shoot these children and be successful sometimes. So, yeah, that's also a horrible, well, not horrible, but the thing is that hunger makes you do these sort of things. In fact, there was this video of this Nigerian guy, no disrespect to any Nigerians, but there's this video of this Nigerian guy who's in this village and he's just throwing money. He's just throwing money and and everybody's just tripping over themselves to pick up the money. Now, some people are like, that's so shameful. How could you trip over it to get some money? But it's like, bro, that's food. I mean, if I were, I personally wouldn't do that because I don't necessarily need a little bit of money like that, or I don't need money like that. But if I did need money like that, yeah, I'll trip over myself. But, what part of you doesn't understand that there is a lack of employment opportunities in these areas, and because of the lack of employment opportunities, people are starving? You just talked about the chicken and the so on and so forth, and the people are visibly thinner. They're visibly thinner. That means that they are close to death. Yes, they want the bread. The idea that they shouldn't want the bread and they should, or even the idea that somebody's going to go over there and grab the bread and just share it, is a complete misunderstanding of the human experience. What happens with regard to this bread thing is this is an odd opportunity. It's not a normal occurrence. You can't say, oh, okay, I'll share it with the other people and then starve later. You have to take the opportunity as it's before you. One of the most important things you want as a African people is a respectable income. You get a respectable income and then you won't have this sort of trouble. But if you do not have a respectable income, your days are numbered. Your days of liberty, your days of freedom, your days of eating are numbered. And knowing that, you have to behave differently. Because, some people talk about a dignified death. There's no real dignified death per se. Yeah, there's no real, that's just poppycock. Revolutionary Matron was clarifying that semolina is like cornmeal, so it's more like a food, right? But okay, so in Algeria, everything has changed since the War of National Liberation. The entire reserves of a family or mecha can be offered to a passing company of soldiers in a single evening. See what I'm saying? So what they're saying is that while before the war, right, you would look at your enemy, your people as the enemy, right, and you would fight over even food, you would fight over even bread, right? During the war, you would give to the soldiers even all of your food because you understand they're bringing in a better day. You understand? You understand that they're ending the oppression and so on and so forth. That's beautiful. As beautiful as, non-Africans could be. That's beautiful, right? So the entire reserve of a family or mecha can be offered to a passing company of soldiers in a single evening. A family can lend its only donkey to carry a wounded fighter. And when several days later, the owner learns the animal was gunned down by a plane, he will not sling curses or threats. Instead of questioning the death of his donkey, he will actually ask whether the wounded man is safe and sound. You see what I'm saying? Yeah, forget that stuff. This material existence isn't as important as liberation. And that No, I'm not crying. You're crying. No, I'm joking. But seriously, that's how we as African people have to start thinking. That the material existence isn't as important as the liberation. You know? Isn't as important as the autonomy. Isn't as important as being our own people, you know? Yeah, I'm not crying. You're crying. But I just want to know who's cutting onions around here, right? No, I'm just messing. All right, so under a colonial regime, no crime is too petty for a loaf of bread or a wretched sheep. Under a colonial regime, man's relationship with the physical world and history is connected to food. In a context of oppression like that of Algeria, for the colonized, living does not mean embodying a set of values, does not mean integrating oneself into a coherent, constructed development of the world. To live simply means not to die. To exist means staying alive. Every day grown is a victory. Not the result of hard work, but a victory celebrating a triumph over life. Stealing dates, therefore, or allowing one's sheep to eat the neighbor's grass is not a disregard for property rights or breaking the law or disrespect. They are attempts at murder. Okay, interesting. Okay, so you guys got this. Let's just rewind, right? It says under a colonial regime, no crime is too petty for a loaf of bread or a wretched sheep, right? Like basically saying that the most important thing is to survive, right? Under the colonial regime. So under a colonial regime, man's relationship with the physical world and history is connected to food. You know, food is the most important thing. And actually, I'm debating what to do in 2 weeks, I guess. Like not this Sunday, but the next Sunday. I'm debating what to do in terms of what video to produce. And I'm thinking that it's going to be about these hunter-gatherers, but it could also be like the select topics from this paper, right? From this book. But we'll see. But notwithstanding that, you know, if you look at the hunter-gatherers, all they think about is food, you know? Or it might be a lost in translation question, but they were asked, hey, what is the most important thing in life or something like that? Or no, sorry, I think it said, like, what is the meaning of life, right? And it might be that it mistranslated to what is the most important thing in life. But notwithstanding that, the person responds, meat. You know, meat is the most important thing. You know, or meat is the meaning of life, you know, eating food, meat, honey, these sort of things. And it's like, you know, to us, that's like, what? That's it? But yeah, if you're in a hunter-gatherer situation, the most important thing to do is to hunt and get food and eat and gather or whatever. But that's it. You know, there's not really, oh, I got to pay my rent. It's not, oh, I got to get my doctoral degree. It's not, you know, it's like it's not going to be that. That's the most important thing in your colonial existence, but that's not the most important thing to people who are free, but in a community that has a very, very basic economy akin to what animals have, right? Or what other animals have. But yeah. So it's like it's connected to food. In the context of oppression like that of Algeria, but it's the same with the colonial situation. Like if you're in the underclass, if you're poor, impoverished, your main thing is food and food, clothing, and shelter. You know what I mean? That's your main thing, you know? And what he's saying is that it does not embody values, you know? It's not a coherent, constructed development of the world, you know? Like your goal, if you're broke, is not, oh yeah, how can I contribute positively to this world? You know, I was watching, like I said, I was watching Star Trek, right? And yeah, you know, like one of these guys was asked, like a robot, he's an android, and it's like, he had a kid, an android kid or whatever. It was weird, but anyway, the android kid says, "Hey, what's the purpose of my life?" And the adult android says, "To contribute something positively on this planet." Right? You know, that's something that not on this planet, on this universe, right? But that's something that you know, somebody with nothing better to do would say. You know, something empty. But if you are, again, like a hunter-gatherer is legit prey and legit predator, you know? Like legit gets into fights with lions and bears and sometimes does not live. But if they do live, they eat that lion and or bear. You know? That's a different life. You know? Hunter and hunted. They are not saying, hey, how can I contribute positively to the planet, right? Like, that's not even a remote moment when you're fighting a lion, you know? So it's not about values and all that stuff, right? So he says, coherent constructive development of the world. To live simply means to not die. To exist means staying alive. Every date grown is a victory. So date is a food that they build. So he's like, every time you grow something, that's a victory, you know, and not the result of hard work, but a victory celebrating a triumph over life. Stealing dates, right, therefore, or allowing one's sheep to eat the neighbor's grass is not a disregard for property rights or breaking the law or disrespect, but there are attempts at murder. So what they're saying is that if your life is raising dates and then somebody else steals your date, you interpret that as somebody else trying to murder you. Okay? And therefore you will murder them back. Right? The way how we look at it today, or, you know, it's modern, you know, colonial society in a sense, we'd say, oh, they're violating property rights. Or, oh, that's really disrespectful. But from the conception of, hey, I need this many dates, my land is so small, and I need all the food I can get from this land. Or I need more food than I can get from this land. And then somebody says, nope, you're going to get less food than you can get from this land. You're like, okay, something's wrong with you. I'm going to kill you. You know? And remember, too, like, I don't know the situation in Algeria, but remember that in Africa, and other parts of Africa, well, I think it's actually all everywhere. Yeah, everywhere. So Wazungu removed you from the best land. So now you're on poorer land, right? You're on poorer land, and you're not going to get the same harvest that you would have gotten if Wazungu never showed up and screwed you over. You know, if Wazungu didn't make so many refugees who took the land next to you, right? But everything was apportioned or partitioned. Usually, like in a village, everything's apportioned and partitioned so that all of you can survive the way you need to survive. And if somebody else goes and takes it, then you're in trouble. Like I told you guys the story about when I was in Jamaica, and you know, this friend of mine, no, not a friend of mine, this gentleman, I think my aunt's husband or something like that. My aunt's husband brought me to his aunt's house, and we went to her backyard, and we grabbed her mangoes. Right now, imagine if he wasn't related to her, and he just grabbed her mangoes, and so we grabbed like maybe 2 bags full of mangoes. Right? If we did that, yet she did not, like, she depended on those mangoes for some reason, right? And she didn't know, and, you know, we weren't related to her, I guess, right? It would be a death sentence for her. You know? Now, not to say that she grew the mangoes herself or anything like that, but the reality is that if you're depending on something and then somebody just deprives you of it, yeah, you know, in your mindset, I mean, it depends on what sort of socioeconomic development you're in, but it could be interpreted as attempted murder, and people see that. So it looks like Harsh Reality Podcast is here. Peace, family. He says, is this symbolic in the practice of feeding the male head of the family first? You must keep the house protectors strong. You mean the dates thing? Well, I know for instance for lions, the lion would like the male lion eats first, even though he doesn't hunt, you know? And the reason why he does that is because if he were weak, the hyenas, who are females, but hyenas could overpower the female lion and her cubs. You know, so the female lion and the cubs go out and hunt, and then the lion gets gets the main amount of meat, right? And then, you know, the female lions can have it too, because have it afterward. The female lions and the cubs can have it afterward. And that the reasoning there is that if you know, even though the male lion didn't hunt, or even though he doesn't even waste any energy hunting, he keeps his energy and he keeps his strength in order that when time comes to eat and the hyenas decide, hey, should we, like, we're going to eat what you just hunted, right? Because they're scavengers. The male lion can overpower them and fight them off, you know? So yeah, I mean, you do want, like, I don't know when I mentioned the male head thing, but yeah, you do want the male to eat first. I mean, generally speaking, like in the situation of men protecting the community, you do want them to be strong, notwithstanding if they're so on and so forth. Now, the trouble comes when the men aren't protecting the community. When the men aren't protecting the community, then of course you then have that fundamental issue. Like you have that fundamental trouble and that fundamental like quarrel between man and woman, and this was the thing that they apparently some early observers, Joe wrote about this, but some early observers in Africa noticed that before the European or before the Arab, I guess, came, Africans had a pretty balanced existence between men and women, but when the European colonized African people, the men who used to have a military role, right, no longer had that. And when you no longer have that military role, then that balance that you once had is gone, And when that balance is gone, then suddenly, you're going to have domestic troubles. So like, but again, the colonial situation is not going to, like, if you're in that moment, you might not see that it's related to the colonial situation. You might just see, hey, like this guy is home more often, like one thing I wrote inside of, that Zubiri book was this idea that the men would go out on patrols, but if the men are now no longer going out on patrols because they no longer have that authority, right? Or like let's say, like a couple of us are guys, so Mchaka, Kofi, Harsh Reality, myself, let's say we're in a community, right? We're in a community and, all right, we're in a community, Revolutionary Nation's there, and Melanin 100 Cents there, right? So we have all of us, right? So we're in a community and, like usually in a perfect African situation, we, the four guys, right, will daily take up the task of patrolling our community and keeping our community safe, or even if there are neighboring villages or neighboring towns or whatever, that we keep them at bay by defending ourselves, right? And because we do this, the women don't mind cooking and doing like small labor while we do hard labor and all that kind of stuff, right? Now, what happens is that if Wazungu comes and colonizes us, he says, no, you guys can no longer patrol and you guys can no longer attack the other people, right? So instead of us, organizing patrols and having, our brotherhood and all that kind of stuff, we're kind of just sitting at home during the times that we could have been patrolling, So like patrolling could have been like your occupation, your regular job, right? But because, or not your regular job, but like your side job, your side gig. But because you're no longer doing that, now you're at home and now the women are still doing what they were doing before. They're still cooking and doing all that kind of stuff. But then you're just kind of sitting back and having conversations and having laughs and having fun, And it's just like, the same with regard to like hunting. I think the Native Americans have this popular joke. Well, I don't know if it's a real Native American joke. It's a pretty funny joke though. Let me see if I can find it. It's a pretty funny joke. Like only the white man could improve this. Hold on a second. It's a pretty popular joke, so I should be able to find it. Just gotta type it. He says, where did the white man go wrong? So it's like tough to argue with this one. He says, Indian chief Two Eagles was asked by a white government official, you observed the white man for 90 years. You've seen his wars and his technological advances. You've seen his progress and the damage he's done. The chief nodded in agreement. The official continued, considering all these events, in your opinion, where did the white man go wrong? The chief stared at the government official for over a minute and then calmly replied, when white men find land, Indians running it. No taxes, no debt, plenty of buffalo, plenty of beaver, clean water. Women did all the work, medicine man free, Indian man spent all day hunting and fishing, all night having sex with wife. Then the chief leaned back and smiled. Only white man dumb enough to think he could improve system like that, right? But the reason, or like there's actually some truth to that. So what happens is this. Let's say, we go to Africa, right? In Africa, the white man find the land, and Africans are running it. we don't really have. I mean, there was taxes, obviously. Well, it depends on what kind of life you saw. Like in the village life, you probably don't really see taxes or debt, right? But then there's plenty of buffalo, plenty of beaver, and clean water. Like Africans knew how to not like didn't pollute the water, and they knew how to eat good, right? Women did all the work. So women in African societies did most of the remedial work, like things that didn't require heavy labor, right? So if you're doing like gardening, this is like an agricultural economy. So if you're doing like gardening, all that kind of stuff, like basic, seed planting and all that kind of stuff, you didn't really need a guy to do that. If you needed to like move a tree or something like that, then yeah, he would do that. Medicine man free, basically, we know that you might have to give something, but not really money, obviously. And, for the native, they were a hunter-gatherer kind of thing. So, well, hunter-fisher. So he's like, they hunted all day and fished. In African communities, there might be some hunting and fishing. There might be some herding. There might be some dancing all day. If you guys looked at Wole Maya's video of the Namibians, they were just dancing all day, right? And the other, like dancing and having fun and joking, right? And the other one is that if you go to the agricultural economy, you're not really farming all day, but you might, the women might go to the market and sell things. And you as a man, like I said, you might just patrol the market. You might patrol the streets. You might go to war with another country, another city, another town, and like bring back something good or something. But a part of it is that you're also patrolling, protecting the community in the sense of there are hunters outside, who want to hunt your food. There are there are nomads who want to come into your grass. So you're also protecting for that sense, right? All night having sex with wife, that's a no-brainer, right? But that's what I'm saying. Like you had this other existence, and then white boy would take that away. I actually don't remember why that tangent is going on though. I think I lost the I think I lost why I went on that tangent. But yeah, as far as I think it was something to do with the meat though. But yeah, as far as that's concerned, there's just a different economy. Like different economic systems have different needs. And what happens though is that the white boy comes in and he disrupts that economic system. And when he disrupts that economic system, the whole balance that existed beforehand becomes unbalanced. Like women do all the work is fine when the man is hunting and fishing all day, right? But if the man can no longer hunt or fish, like, and the water is no longer clean, right? So she can no longer wash her food, and and the food tastes different, and there's less meat available because white boy kills the beavers and he kills the buffalo. He cuts down the trees, right? So now, like if you're hunting for some animal in the forest, but there's no trees, that animal is not going to, it's not going to be as easy to hunt because first off, the animal's not going to hang around a bunch of tree stumps because they're out in the open. And you don't have any hiding spaces. So, Wazungu really does that. And when he does that and he encroaches on your land, suddenly you're living closer to each other. You're living with less resources. And the woman might keep up with tradition, but the man is not. And again, they're going to have domestic disputes. So that's where the problem comes in. And then the disrespect between each other. And then the murder between each other, Because one of the things about in Africa was that the men did not do domestic work, right? Like they did not do the cooking and cleaning. And, one thing that black women will often tell us is that they will not have us doing that domestic cleaning. But then it behooves you when you can't protect her or when you don't protect her. There's going to be situations Wazungu is going to take advantage of the black fear of him because it's not going to be everyone. Not all of us are afraid of him. But a lot of African people are. And because of that, he would take advantage of your wife. And then what? Like she's not, treating you like the king anymore. You broke a basic social contract. But all right. So once you have seen men and women in Kabylia struggling down into the valley for weeks on end to bring up soil in little baskets, you can understand that theft is attempted murder and not a peccadillo, right? Peccadillo is probably like a small crime. So he's like, they go down to the valley for weeks to bring up soil, and then somebody just steals from them. Yeah, no, that's murder. right? The sole obsession is the need to fill that ever-shrinking stomach, however little it demands. Who do you take it out on? The French are down on the plain with the police, the army, and their tanks. In the mountains, there are only Algerians. Up above, heaven with the promise of an afterlife. Down below, the French with their firm promises of jail, beatings, and executions. Inevitably, you stumble up against yourself. Here lies the core of self-hatred that characterizes racial conflict in segregated societies. So, and this is so, like, I like this. I like this in the sense of, like, I don't usually like the word self-hatred. I don't really care for it. But I like this in the sense of he's describing self-hatred and why we see it how we see it today. Who's the person that stepped on your shoes? The shoes that you spent months working to get. I think they said that Jordans are on average like $250, right? Not to say that you need to work for. I mean, here's what it is. You got if you're getting, like, back then, you're probably getting $10 an hour or less, right? If you're getting $10 an hour and your shoes cost $250, right? Then you have to work 25 hours, right? That's 3 days of work, like full, right? Full, actually more than 3 days, but still full 3 days of work to get the shoes on your feet. And if somebody steps on it with like muddy shoes and ruins the shoes that you already knew was a bad investment, right? You already knew was a bad investment, and on the day that you decided to wear it, the one day you decided to wear it for some reason, because you didn't want to wear the shoes, right? Somebody ruins it, yeah. And then they step on it and they don't even say, oh, I'm sorry, or my fault. They're just like, shit, man, get a new one, and you might be like, well, why don't you get angry at the police? And it's like, well, yeah, the police ain't stepping on my shoes. And if they did, the reality is that they have police, they have armies, they have tanks. They do beatings, they do jails, they do executions. The guy who stepped on your shoes, he just underestimated you. So the criminality of the Algerian, his impulsiveness, the savagery of his murders are not, therefore, the consequence of how his nervous system is organized or specific character traits, but the direct result of the colonial situation. The fact that the Algerian patriots discussed this issue, that they were not afraid to challenge the beliefs inculcated in them by colonialism, that they understood each was a screen for the other, and in reality they were committing suicide by pitting themselves against their neighbors, was to have an immense impact on the revolutionary consciousness. What I like about this is how similar it is to the African American rhetoric that we are familiar with today. It's to say that, it seems like how people talk about black on black crime, Mchaka would say, what about black on black crime? From Tariq Nasheed would say it, actually. But how parallel it is. That's why I say you got to go for this international literature. It's pretty good. He's chewing something. All right. So, when you say, well, what about black on black crime? You realize that.
What about black on black crime?
You realize that. The society. I mean, you realize that even then there was this revolutionary consciousness that said, look, this is actually colonialism. And if you get rid of, and not just that, but the violence that we do against ourselves is suicide. Like, if you look at my older literature, you'll see me saying the same thing, but you'd also see a lot of people today saying the same thing, that black on black violence is suicide, and that's just like, it's just interesting because this is 50, 60 years ago in a whole different culture, whole different community with a whole different language. Remember, the Algerians are not even speaking English. In fact, I think they're actually speaking French, to be honest. But they might be speaking their own indigenous tongue, too. Impact of revolutionary consciousness. Once again, the colonized subject fights in order to put an end to domination. But he must also ensure that all the untruths planted within him by the oppressors are eliminated. In a colonial regime, such as the one in Algeria, the ideas taught by colonialism impacted not only the European minority, but also the Algerian. Total liberation involves every facet of the personality. The ambush or the skirmish, the torture or the massacres of one's comrades entrenches the determination to win, revives the unconscious, and nurtures the imagination. When the nation in its totality is set in motion, the new man is not a posteriori is not an a posteriori creation of this nation, but coexists with it, matures with it, and triumphs with it. This dialectical prerequisite explains the resistance to accommodating forms of colonization or window dressing. Independence is not a magic ritual, but an indispensable condition for men and women to exist in true liberation. In other words, to master all the material resources necessary for a radical transformation of society. Okay, so we're up to the conclusion. But before we go, let's let me tell you guys about the other things on the radio station.
This is D
Give some
Webb with
shout-outs.
the Harsh Reality Podcast, asking you to tune in where we tackle the news of the day that affects our community, only on KWAZ Radio.
Greetings, fam. Tune in to The Learning Curve with me, the revolutionary matron on KWAZ Radio.
Greetings, everyone. This is Koku from the Bitter Medicine Podcast, inviting you to tune in to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio.
All right, so you guys heard. Make sure you guys check out the Harsh Reality Podcast, the revolutionary matron with the Learning Curve, and of course, Bitter Medicine Podcast. Grateful for everybody being here, and hope you guys are enjoying this book as much as I am. So we're actually at the conclusion. We've made it this far. It's 20 episodes, and this is the 20th. Obviously, the series is way too damn long, so I don't expect anybody to really watch it in the future. But notwithstanding that, I appreciate everybody for being here, right? Anyway, the conclusion is, now, comrades, now is the time to decide to change sides. We must shake off the great mantle of night which has enveloped us and reach for the light. The new day which is dawning must find us determined, enlightened, and resolute. We must abandon our dreams and say farewell to our old beliefs and former friendships. Let us not lose time in useless laments or sickening mimicry. Let us leave this Europe, which never stops talking of man, yet massacres him at every one of its street corners, at every corner of the world. For centuries, Europe has brought the progress of other men to a halt and enslaved them for its own purposes and glory. For centuries, it has stifled virtually the whole of humanity in the name of so-called spiritual adventure. Look at it now, teetering between atomic destruction and spiritual disintegration. And yet nobody can deny its achievements at home have not been crowned with success. Europe has taken over leadership of the world with fervor, cynicism, and violence. And look how the shadow of its monuments spreads and multiplies. Every movement Europe makes bursts the boundaries of space and thought. Europe has denied itself not only humility and modesty, but also solicitude and tenderness. It only shows of miserliness. Its only show of miserliness has been towards man. Only toward man has it shown itself to be niggardly and murderously carnivorous. So, my brother, how could we fail to understand that we have better things to do than follow in that Europe's footsteps? This Europe, which never stopped talking of man, which never stopped proclaiming its sole concern was man, we now know the price of suffering humanity has paid for every one of its spiritual victories. Come, comrades. The European game is finally over. We must look for something else. We can do anything today, provided we do not ape Europe, provided we are not obsessed with catching up with Europe. Europe has gained such a mad and reckless momentum that it has lost control and reason and is heading at dizzying speed towards the brink from which we would be advised to remove ourselves as quickly as possible. It is all too true, however, that we need a model, schemas, and examples. For many of us, the European model is the most elating, but we have seen in the preceding pages how misleading such an imitation can be. European achievements, European technology, and European lifestyles must stop tempting us and leading us astray. When I look for man in Europeans, lifestyles, and technology, I see a constant denial of man, an avalanche of murders. Man's condition, his projects and collaborations with others on tasks that strengthen man's totality are new issues which require genuine inspiration. Let us decide not to imitate Europe, and let us tense our muscles and our brains in a new direction. Let us endeavor to invent a man in full, something which Europe has been incapable of achieving. 2 centuries ago, a former European colony took it into its head to catch up with Europe. It has been so successful that the United States of America has become a monster where the flaws, sickness, and inhumanity of Europe have reached frightening proportions. Comrades, have we nothing else to do but create a third Europe? The West saw itself on a spiritual adventure. It is in the name of the Spirit, meaning the spirit of Europe, that Europe justified its crimes and legitimized the slavery in which it held 4/5 of humanity. Yet the European spirit is built on strange foundations. The whole of European thought developed in places that were increasingly arid and increasingly inaccessible. Consequently, it was natural that the chances of encountering man became less and less frequent. A permanent dialogue with itself, an increasingly obnoxious narcissism inevitably paved the way for a virtual delirium where intellectual thought turns into agony, since the reality of man as a livable, working, self-made being is replaced by words, an assemblage of words, and the tensions generated by their meanings. There were Europeans, however, who urged the European worker to smash this narcissism and break with this denial of reality. Generally speaking, the European workers did not respond to the call. The fact was that the workers believed they too were part of the prodigious adventure of the European spirit. All the elements for a solution to the major problems of humanity existed at one time or another in European thought, but the Europeans did not act on the mission that was designated them and which consisted of virulently pondering these elements, modifying their configuration, their being, of changing them, and finally taking the problem of man to an infinitely higher plane. Today we are witnessing a stasis of Europe. Comrades, let us flee the stagnation where dialectics has gradually turned into a logic of the status quo. Let us re-examine the question of man. Let us re-examine the question of cerebral reality, the brain mass of humanity in its entirety, whose affinities must be increased, whose connections must be diversified, and whose communications must be humanized again. Come, brothers. We have far too much work on our hands to revel in outmoded games. Europe has done what it had to do, and all things considered, it has done a good job. Let us stop accusing it, but let us say to it firmly, it must stop putting on such a show. We no longer have reason to fear it. Let us stop, then, envying it. The third world is today facing Europe as one colossal mass, whose project must be to try and solve the problems this Europe was incapable of finding the answers to. But what matters now is not a question of profitability, not a question of increased productivity, not a question of production rates. No, it is not a question of back to nature. It is the very basic question of not dragging man in directions which mutilate him, of not imposing on his brain tempos that rapidly obliterate and unhinge it. The notion of catching up must not be used as a pretext to brutalize man, to tear him from himself and his inner consciousness, to break him, to kill him. No, we do not want to catch up with anyone. But what we want is to walk in the company of man, every man, night and day, for all time. It is not a question of stringing the caravan out where groups are spaced so far apart they cannot see the one in front, and men who no longer recognize each other meet less and less and talk to each other less and less. The third world must start over a new history of man, which takes account of not only the occasional prodigious prodigious thesis maintained by Europe, but also its crimes, the most heinous of which has been committed at the very heart of man, the pathological dismembering of his functions and the erosions of his unity, and in the context of the community, the fracture, the stratification, and the bloody tensions fed by class, and finally, on the immense scale of humanity, the racial hatred, slavery, exploitation, and above all, the bloodless genocide, whereby 1.5 billion men have been written off. So, comrades, let us not pay tribute to Europe by creating states, institutions, and societies that draw their inspiration from it. Humanity expects other things from us than this grotesque and generally obscene emulation. If we want to transform Africa into a new Europe, America into a new Europe, then let us entrust the destinies of our countries to the Europeans. They will do a better job than that rest of us. But if we want humanity to take one step forward, if we want to take it another level than the one where Europe has placed it, then we must innovate. We must be pioneers. If we want to respond to the expectations of our peoples, we must look elsewhere besides Europe. Moreover, if we want to respond to the expectations of the Europeans, we must not send them back at reflection, however ideal, of their society and their thoughts that periodically sickens even them. For Europe, for ourselves and for humanity, comrades, we must make a new start, develop a new way of thinking, and endeavor to create a new man. And that's the book. So this is a footnote. It's not that important. I think it's too long. I mean, you guys could read it yourselves. I don't know who wrote that. Yeah, so that was the conclusion. I didn't expect it to be a speech, but it was. Some things were obviously wrong in there. Some things were obviously wrong in there. I don't see any. I think all the comments are gone. What happened to all the comments? So I can't see any more comments for some reason. I think the page messed up. But what can I tell you about this? So I think there were like 2-3 parts that were like, what? I mean, one part obviously is where he's talking about we really need to work with the other people, you know. That's a big error. You know, that's not really a new way of thinking. I do like the fact that he's saying, look, let's not follow behind Europe. But of course, as everybody's going to point out, he was a misogynist, right? I'm going to try to open up my this video on my phone so that I can actually see in case there are comments that are coming in, or comments and questions. Because if you have any questions or comments or concerns, let me know. If you wanted me to look at the other pages, I guess I could probably do that. Oh, yeah. So let me see. Bit of Medicine says, put it all in a playlist. If folks watch one, they will watch all. Yeah. I was going to do that. Niggardly. I knew about niggardly. I try to not use that word. You know, I try not to use that word because I feel like it's something. But yeah, so Archaeology said niggardly is definitely going to be added to the vernacular. Yeah, I'm not going to. Like, I knew about the word and I was like, that don't look right, you know? Learning Curve says they fooled the workers into thinking they were a part of the plan. Also interesting. And Revolutionary Matron says hit the like button. But yeah, I like how he points that out too. That's actually a good point too. How he says that realistically, he's talking about Marxism right here. He says, he's talking about Marxism and he says Europe developed the solution. Let's see. A permanent dialogue in itself. There were Europeans who urged the European workers, that's the proletariat, to smash this narcissism, you know, smash the capitalist system and break it with reality. But generally speaking, the proletariat did not respond to the call, you know? Like, obviously there's Russia, obviously there's China. Although China wasn't proletariat, it was more of an agricultural, like it was an agriculturalist. But the peasants, it's a peasant revolution as opposed to a proletariat revolution. But you know, generally speaking, but the thing is that Marx predicted it for London, not London, but yeah, London, for England, right? So he said this will be the natural evolution of capitalism in England, and it just never came about, you know. But like realistically speaking, yes, if England did go through a revolution where they said no, we're going to help and be good for everybody and all that kind of stuff, then realistically speaking, we wouldn't be dealing with capitalism right now. Possibly. Wait, you said something? Your voice is mad low. Did you say why not?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the idea is that if not just England, obviously, but like England too. But like, let's say if England, all right, let's actually rewrite history. Let's say if England, if instead of the USSR, you had England. No, right. Instead of World War II ending up how it was, or let's say instead of the aftermath of World War II ending up how it was, England and Russia became the big allies instead of England and the U.S. You know, then everything would be radically different. You know, if the England and Russia were the big allies, then like England, Russia, and France were the allies. Then essentially all of Germany would be Soviet. You know, all of England would be Soviet. France would be Soviet, right? And then all of Africa would be Soviet. You get what I'm saying? So you don't really have a Cold War anymore, but you have America versus the world. And America would not be able to withstand that. No. You know? Not even the slightest. So like instead of like those Nazi scientists going to America, you have those Nazi scientists going to Russia. You know? And then you have China, Russia, England, like all of the major nations allied against America, right? And then eventually, like America would also have internal agitations to the point where America would also go towards that sort of economic system. And that sort of economic system done, I don't think it would be done correctly, but done correctly. Well, the objective there would be that if it were done a certain way, it would be that, you know, like it would be less exploitative, you know, and it would be more harmonious. Now, obviously, that's not realistic, but that's pretty much what was like suspected, you know. Would it happen that way? No, but that's what was suspected. So yeah, that's what I would say about that. It would just be a different world. It'd just be a different world. So it's generally speaking, yes, but it's like that never happened though. But that would be like it's just the idea of what would happen in the aftermath of Germany. So I got the comments back up. He says, Kofi says Fanon likes to use the N-word, right? He does, right? Harsh Reality says, jokes, man, just jokes, shaking my head. Well, yeah, I mean, like, yeah, look, I mean, like, it's not a bad word. I mean, it's a bad word. I think it's a bad word. like, I don't think I can get away with it. I think even saying, I was like, did I say that right? Like, it might be niggardly. I don't know. But yeah, I like that part. You said what?
I was gonna ask, like, what's going on?
Oh, I mean, me just saying, like, yeah. All elements of the solution. You thought I've been hacked? Yeah, okay. Let us examine the question of man. I like that he said that part. I think another part I liked, like two other. No, there were other parts that I didn't really care for, but I like the fact that generally speaking, he's against us imitating Europe. And the thing is that even though he's against us imitating Europe, the reality is that our leadership in Africa is perfectly for us imitating Europe. You know, it's perfectly for us imitating Europe, and there's not really us sitting back and thinking of how to, solve these bigger problems for ourselves, you know. I wish I should have stopped while I was reading because I can't even tell. Like, there's no way to see. You can't highlight this stuff, so because it's not really text. It's a picture, so you can't highlight text when it's just a picture. So otherwise, I would have been able to. But I think that's pretty much it then. I mean, you guys heard the parts that were pretty disturbing, but this main idea of everybody in the world getting together, you know. We want humanity to take one step forward. Like most people do not care for other people, you know? Like when China's doing what China's doing, it's not doing it for the good of humanity. You know? It's not doing it for everyone, you know? Right here. But what we want to do is walk in the company of man, every man, night and day. Like China's not saying let's walk in the company of every man, you know? China is not even saying let's walk in the company of every Asian. They're just saying let's do for us. Let's go to the top. You know, a white man did not say let's do this for every man. He says let's go to the top. And I'm not going to say it's an African flaw because, like I said, the hunter-gatherer is an African, but does not have any of the characteristics that we tend to associate with Africans. You know, Like the respect for nature and all that stuff is just out of, like, it's not even there. They, like, legit, the video that I saw, and you guys can see it in the Discord, but the video I saw, the guy was like, we're gonna go and attack this bamboo camp. I don't even know if they were going to eat the bamboo. They were just legit, we're going to attack the bamboo while they were sleeping. And I think, yeah, they were going to eat the bamboo, but the baboon, yeah. But, like, yeah, that's real life. That's not even, like, there's no, hey, look, this is a sacred animal and blah, blah, blah. It's, like, legit, I can eat this baboon, I could eat this lion, I could eat, like, and, like, you would think that they had, like, claws for teeth. Not claws for teeth, but you think they had sharp teeth, but they just look like regular people, They just have a different economic system. So, yeah, but nobody's like, oh, yeah, we got to do every man and blah, blah, blah. It really is. So, like that idea, that ideology was imposed on us. And so while we talk about colonialism and decolonizing, all that kind of stuff, we also have to realize that just looking out for the next person. And here's the thing, too, you want to realize, too. It's like even this whole bigger identity of, just identifying with each other is a part of that colonial identity, in a sense, And, you take it or leave it. But you realize you have to start being strategic and say to yourself, how can we use what we've learned up till now, Like what is good and what is bad? Like what's good is obviously, this technology in a sense, right? What's bad is this sort of, this idea that, oh, we got to help out everybody. Right? Because like neither the technology or the helping everybody is a real idea for anybody. This like I said, you got to like, I might just do the hunter-gatherer video, but like the hunter-gatherer is not like, oh yeah, we got to help out everybody. We got to, no. They're just like, let me go eat some meat. And that's just like, that's the basic, like that's how we were for hundreds of thousands of years, or over 100,000 years. That's how we were, we were just, hey, let's go get some meat, that looks good. Or, hey, let's go fishing, let's fish today. Let's hunt later. Let's have sex, like that was the life. Today when we're talking about, oh yeah, well, each of us have to, every people around the world have to get together. Like that's just nonsense. Like nobody thinks like that. That's just a way to confuse you because nobody else thinks like that. China doesn't say that. It just doesn't. But I can't find the other one that I thought was bad. But other than that, thanks everybody for coming through. This is 20 episodes, 240 pages. You guys could read the last few pages yourself. It actually seems like it might be pretty long, so I'm not even going to touch it. But other than that, thank you so much for listening. And of course, Shem Hotep, Anku Ja Seneb Neb, Amen Ma'at, Dua Netra. This guy really did it while I'm recording, All right, so anyway, peace, fam.